Hello and welcome back. In our last couple of lessons, we've been learning about CSS. And in the last lesson, we learned about internal CSS, and it was a little bit of a CSS crash course. In this video, we're going to basically take all of the work that we did in that last video when we were working with internal CSS, and we're going to separate it into its own separate file. And then we're going to link to that file. Now, the way we do that is actually relatively simple, and the CSS is written the same as internal CSS, so we're not really doing too much more work. And the nice thing about this is if you have CSS that is styling your page, maybe it changes the background color of your page, and you want to change it across every page on your website, you can do that. And you can do that by basically editing one line of code instead of having to open up 1,000 different HTML files and change it 1,000 different times. You can open up one file and do it just once. So in this video, we are going to learn about external CSS and how we can work with other files using HTML and .css files. Okay, so you can see that I have internal CSS.html open here. I'm going to save this as external_CSS.html. And let's go ahead and change that title as well to external CSS. And I'm going to open this as external. There we go. So that just looks a little different from the last video, just because I was zoomed in. So if I did something like this, it would look a lot more familiar. So I'm completely zoomed out now. I'm at regular 100%. And we have external CSS, and we want to style this file and maybe another one. So let's call this external CSS number 1. And we're going to change this to external CSS number 1, so we know what page we're looking at here, external CSS number 1. And let's save this again as external CSS 2.html, just a different page. And then I'm going to go into my view settings here, my editor layout, and split right. And I want to open external CSS. In VS Code, to jump around, all you have to do is hit Command P or Control P. I believe that's what the default is. If it's not, there is a command for it, and I just can't remember what it is off the top of my head. I might have customized VS Code a little too far already. But there is a shortcut in here where you can basically just start typing. So I can type in like css.html, and it will find all my css.html files. Inline CSS, external CSS, internal CSS. Okay, so on my left, I have external CSS 1, and on my right, I have external CSS page number 2. And you can see that we have the exact same CSS in here now. And let's go ahead and also open this up in our browser. So we have external CSS 2 and external CSS. So they look pretty much identical, except one character has changed and the title has changed. What happens if I grab all of this CSS here and I just delete it? Well, my page goes back to being unstyled, but CSS2 will be normally styled, the way that we did it in the previous lesson. So it's still ugly, but it is styled to some degree. But this one isn't, so what do we do? What if there was a way where we could just create a brand new file and link to that, and we could have all of this CSS and all of this CSS, since it's the exact same, in one location? So actually a better example is background color. I want to change the background color to red. So external CSS 1 should have a background color of red, and external CSS 2 should have a background color of Gainsborough. Number 1 has red, number 2 has Gainsborough, but what if I want them to be the same? Well, now I have to change it here. Or what if I want to change this to black? Well, then I have to change it here. Now, this doesn't seem like a big problem at the moment because we're only working with 2 pages. But expand that to 1,000 pages. And 1,000-page website is not unheard of. They're actually fairly common. Are you going to change this 1,000 times? No. I do not want you doing that. I don't want to do that. Nobody wants to do that. So instead, what we do is we take all of our code here. I'm going to undo that because black is not a good color. And let's call it Gainsborough. And we're going to create a new file in here. We're going to call this one, let's just call it style.css. Save as style.css is going to be right beside the external css.html file in the exact same directory. And let's just go ahead and grab all of this in here and cut. And by cut, I mean I just went cut. Grab that. Paste. And that's it. So at this point, we can look at external CSS page 1. And this is not going to work for you. Absolutely not. This is going to be completely unstyled. And it's because we haven't told HTML to link to the CSS file. It doesn't know about it yet. Basically, it's just minding its own business. So the way we get around that is in our external CSS 1, we say link. Is there a CSS one in here? Oh, that's pretty cool. Okay. I didn't know VS Code had that feature. That is actually fantastic. But let's walk through this together. So what I did here was I created an element called link. It is a self-closing tag. Its rel, or its relation to this particular file, is a style sheet. That's what CSS is. We have an href, a hyperlink reference to the particular file called style.css. And to follow more XHTML standards, we could add the slash, or we could leave it as regular HTML. It doesn't really matter. So I'm going to zoom out here again. And again, we're on external CSS 1. And refresh our page, and look at that. Our styling is back. But if we go to CSS 2, well, that's because I didn't save this one. Now, if we go back to CSS 2 for a second time, we can actually see that it looks very, very similar, but the problem is we have all of this in here. So what happens if we did the same thing we did the first time, where we just got rid of all the styling? Well, it's going to go back to looking ugly, regular default. And if I get rid of the style element, same thing, nothing happens. I'm hitting that refresh button, nothing is happening. And all we have to do is add one line of code here. So I'm going to copy, paste. And I mean, really all it is the link rel is equal to your style sheet. That's pretty cool. I can't believe that autofilled for me. That is really nice. And so either of these options will work for you. The bottom one is XHTML, the top one is HTML. So let's stick with HTML. Now what happens when I refresh? You can see that it works and they're the exact same. Now what happens if I go to style.css and I change that background color? I change that background color to black. Okay, well, because this one file is now connected to external CSS 1 and external CSS 2, it will take effect on both of them. So when I refresh here and I refresh here, it takes place. And I go back to style.css and I change the H1 to have a background color of white and a text color of red. So I changed two pieces of code in one file and it's going to affect both files, just like that. So that is external CSS. Basically, it's the same as internal CSS, but all we did was link the file to an external file so that we don't have to write or rewrite the same code over and 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 over again. Because honestly, that is just no way to live your life. That will make you hate your job and that will make you hate web development. If I had to do that 1,000 times, I would hate web development. All right, your task for this video is going to be somewhat of a doozy, but I want you to give this a real thought. A real thought? Not a real thought. I want you to give this a real chance. Your task, create a new .html file from scratch. Please do it from scratch. Make sure you have your head, your body, your doc type. Don't forget your doc type like I did. Create a new, let's actually call this one something specific. Create a new file called external1.html. Create another one and call this one external2.html from scratch. Again, it's just good practice. Number 3, create a file called style.css. Create a file called style.css. Make sure it's in the same directory as your HTML files, though. It has to be in the exact same directory. Okay, so make sure all 3 of these files are in the same folder. 4, link external1.html and external2.html to the style.css file. And for this one, you can use link rel is equal to style sheet. href is equal to style.css. You can do something like that. That would work. And then lastly, I would like you to style something. So open up your style.css and maybe change your body. So let's say this. Change the body background color. And it doesn't have to be a nice color. It just needs to be visually identified. So it could be something really gross, like background color red. So if you just type that inside of your style.css, refresh your pages inside of your browser, just like this, just like when I hit refresh over and over and over again. If you do that and your background color turns red in both files, then you are good to go. You have now successfully learned how to link to an external file. This is a lot like linking to an image, but you can actually edit something in this file. So you're linking one file to another. So it's arguably more important that you know how to do this than it is to add an image. Otherwise, good luck on this, and I will see you in the next lesson.